Right, it's a good morning from the studios of Radio FM 88 Australia in Brisbane, and this is our United States Australia show where our co-host is in Cape Canaveral. And it's without further ado, I'm going to invite Elisa to come to the microphone and give us a heads up on our today's guest.
All right, so thank you everybody for being here. I am honored to be here once again. Today we have David Crow, a master clinical herbalist. I am mega impressed with his resume, just the information that he has, the knowledge, the vast knowledge of different medicines. And I'm gonna let him tell you all about it, but you definitely want to stay tuned because we're going to be talking about detoxing. We're going to be talking about mistakes that people make when detoxing. And we're also going to talk about all the amazing courses that he has online as well. So without further ado, here's David Crow. David, welcome.
Thank you, Elisa. And thank you, Jeff, also behind the scenes for the invitation.
Welcome.
So David, I would love it if you could tell us just, I'm sure it's a long story, but just a summary of your life and how did you come from being like what I call a muggle or somebody who's not spiritually aware yet to being spiritually aware and then coming into this absolutely beautiful career of being a master herbalist, which is just you got to know a lot of information, and not only that, you're using four different types of medicine. So please tell us all about it.
Sure. Well, the short answer is I never was a muggle. I came this way.
Oh, good for you.
Actually, ever since childhood, I had an interest in the spiritual traditions of other cultures. And I think it was probably because of my dad. He had an interest in Greek mythology, and he took the family to live in Greece for several years when I was a child. And so some of the earliest memories were temples and sacred places. And I grew up with, those symbols and the archetypes of Greek mythology. And when I came back to Southern California, where I was from, I was different. And I always retained that interest in other cultures. So I left American life relatively early, and I went traveling all over the world as a teenager, actually, and went through Central America and encountered indigenous shamans and curanderos and curanderas and plant medicine, when I was 18 and 19 years old. And that was a long time ago. And then when I came back to the US again, I was very interested in these traditions, but there wasn't anything. This was long before the internet and long before all these teachings were arriving. So I started studying on my own and discovered that there was an acupuncture college that was going to be opening up in the early 1980s in San Francisco. And so I attended that college. I was one of the first Westerners to get trained in Chinese medicine in the West. And in that training, I was exposed to the history of Taoism and Qigong and herbal medicine and acupuncture and so on. I went on to become a licensed acupuncturist, practiced in San Francisco, but I wasn't very satisfied with the level of training. It was just coming to the West. It was really simplistic. So I met around that time a very important spiritual teacher, a Tibetan Buddhist yogi, Kalu Rinpoche, who was the real thing. He was, he had spent many, many years as a practicing yogi, meditating in the snow in the Himalayas. And I was quite impressed when I met him, and I became his student and spent quite a bit of time with him. And he encouraged me to study Tibetan medicine and learn about that tradition. And so I did. I closed my clinic in San Francisco and I just moved to Nepal. That's where he suggested. And so I packed up everything and I just went to Kathmandu, and I had no idea what I was going to find. But within a week, I found my teacher of Tibetan medicine and the only translator in the entire country who knew both Tibetan medical language and English and could translate for me. And so I spent a year with Dr. Ngawang Chopal, and then I went back 6 times to study with him further. And I ended up being his only Western student. And I was one of the first Westerners to actually receive education in classical Tibetan medicine and also Ayurvedic medicine, starting in the 80s, actually. I studied in the Himalayas throughout the 80s and the 90s, and then went and studied many times with different teachers in India after that. And so I was also in clinical practice, coming and going from these places. And so I was bringing all of this herbal knowledge and training from these teachers in the Himalayas primarily, and importing the herbs and the formulas and using them in my clinical practice. But I was also very involved in the spiritual lineages that are woven into these herbal traditions, because in these traditions, as everywhere actually, herbal medicine is inseparable from spiritual practices. And so in the Himalayan tradition, Chinese medicine, Taoism, it's interwoven with Qigong and Taoist alchemy meditation practices. And in Tibetan medicine, it's inseparable from Buddhism and Buddhist Tantra practices specifically. And Ayurveda is inseparable from the Vedas and from yoga. And so I was very interested in the parallel spiritual lineages that are all woven together with the herbal traditions. And so there are really amazing things about how herbal medicine has been practiced forever, actually, because you can look all over the world and it's in the Amazonian traditions and herbal traditions everywhere. When people harvested the plants, they prayed and had ceremonies and gave thanks. And when they made the medicines, they recited mantras. And when they were treating people, they had spiritual practices and meditations. And the doctors are trained how to meditate and develop compassion. And there's all of these very, very deep and profound links between spiritual practice and herbal medicine. So that was really my primary interest, was those two things. So I spent quite a lot of time studying not only these medical traditions, but in meditation retreats with a lot of teachers also. So all of this has culminated over many years to where I'm at now, which is that I am in clinical practice still after 40 years. And I am basically just very grateful that I received all this information directly from those teachers, directly in person. And most of those teachers are gone now. They were old when I was there and they're gone. And so I feel very fortunate to have received these teachings and to have the opportunity to practice medicine with what they told me, and to also practice these spiritual practices. So that's, that's about as short as I could do, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm just, it's like going on a journey here with you. So to me, of interest is definitely all that knowledge. What do you find that's similar and what do you find that's different? And then how do you bring it all together?
Well, that depends how you are defining similar and different. Now, classical Asian medicine is fundamentally similar all over. Chinese medicine is very similar to Ayurveda, and Tibetan medicine is very similar, and Persian Unani medicine and Greek medicine, Greek ancient medicine, all these medical systems, they're similar in the sense that they use plants. Plants are the universal medicine, and that is universal in all systems. But in Asian systems, there's also a cosmology. And the cosmology is what defines the use of the plants. And so in Chinese medicine, we hear terms like qi, life force. And we find that term also in Ayurveda, prana, life force. And so we see that there are common principles and concepts of cosmology, qi and prana, or the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, space, these kind of things. And this is an old way of understanding nature as it's operating inside the body. Now, a lot of those diagnostic techniques were very important at those times. Now, my practice is really integrating a lot of that classical medicine, classical thinking, classical concepts into modern medicine, because there's diagnostic methods like listening to the pulse and looking at the tongue and things like that. They give you general information about a person's constitution, but they don't show you what's going on, like with liver enzymes. And so now what's happening is that there's a big integration that's happening between traditional herbal concepts, okay, like these classical Asian medical systems specifically, and modern allopathic medicine. And it has to be that way because so many people are on medications and so many people are ill and they're trying to treat themselves, but they're confused about how to do it. And so my focus now is really taking that classical training that I had and applying it in a modern medical clinic, in the sense that I'm doing both. I'm not a practicing medical doctor. I'm only doing telemedicine consultations, but mostly in my practice, I'm talking to people about conditions where there are medications involved, or they're wanting to avoid them or to reduce them, and so forth. And so it's almost inescapable now. Modern medicine is inescapable. But I had many years where I was practicing really classical Ayurveda, doing the panchakarma, the detoxification with the warm oil massage and the steam, and integrating that with acupuncture and so on. So there are many similarities in all of these classical Asian medical systems, but there's very fundamental differences as well between that and allopathic medicine. Now, we need both. And it's not good to have strong opinions when it comes to medicine. It's not good to be too opinionated about either system, because both offer a tremendous amount and both have very clear strong points and very clear weak points also, which we can discuss as we go along.
Yeah. So how, like, what comes to mind is, okay, let's say I have an issue. How do you pick, like, if Ayurveda says to use, I don't know, tea tree oil, and then Chinese medicine says use fish oil, like, how do you marry the two? Like, how do you choose, like, oh, I think for this person I'm going to use X, do you have to pick, like how do you, like, choose between what you have to choose from?
Well, I start with the individual, and I gather as much information as I can in the first consultation. Now, just that by itself is kind of different, because a lot of doctors don't have time to actually delve into a person's history. And it's very common for people to have a presentation. They come to the clinic and they have a problem. But then when you start to look at the history, you can start to connect a lot of dots about what happened, at this age and then before that. And then what we see is that if we put together a chronology, it's very common to see that a person took a lot of antibiotics in childhood. Well, that kind of set them off in the wrong direction as far as their gut immunity, okay, and immunity in general. And then maybe after that, they ended up with, pretty severe infection of, mono, Epstein-Barr virus, like in high school or college. But nobody connected those dots. immune weakness and antibiotics in childhood. And then the person has chronic fatigue syndrome that's bothering them through their 30s. And then the viral load starts to work on other levels. And then, the pandemic comes along and a lot of people got hit with COVID and got the vaccines, and both are pro-inflammatory in nature. And nobody is looking at the cause and effect of what has happened over the last 5 years. Okay. And so a lot of people are going to clinics and they have this history. And then, for women, there's birth control pills, and then there's menopause, and there's all of these things that add up. And at a certain point, they might, start taking, go on a medication for anxiety or something. And they don't put together that the medication for anxiety, like a year later, is giving them migraines. And so they're seeing somebody for migraines. So that's what I do at the beginning, is I do a complete chronological health history. And that's a revelation for people. And people have never actually done that for themselves. It's a basic practice that I recommend.
Right.
Put together your health history and connect all the dots. And then a lot of times people are on medications, but the doctors don't tell them what these medications can do or might do, and they don't research it. And so that responsibility comes to me, and I just tell them, go to drugs.com and put in that Xanax and take a look at, what that can do to your liver. Okay, well, maybe that's why the liver enzymes are high. And so I do a lot of detective work with pharmaceutical drugs, and that's a revelation for people also. And so that's what I'm calling clinical level self-care. We've got to get involved and take care of our health now at a completely different level than previously. So that's how I do it. That's how I do it. Extensive historical background. And that also includes people send over their lab tests, and we talk about that. Now, I take all of that and I use that as the primary starting point. But then when it comes to the treatment, what I do is I work primarily with herbal medicine, but it's based on a real clear understanding of this whole health history and where the problems are that I am using allopathic diagnosis to get at. So that's how I work.
Oh, wow. Okay. So as you are looking at, no, this just reminds me. Okay, now I remember what I was going to tell you. In one of the videos that I saw, you also mentioned that childhood vaccines, as well as something additional that you also look at to make your assessment as well. I know that you mentioned the COVID vaccine, but also the childhood vaccines is also something you look at as well, right?
I look at everything, and I have no opinions about any of it.
I'm
not pro or anti anything, because this is just the nature of our society. Okay. And we have all of these pharmaceutical drugs. They're part of many people's lives. And we have vaccines, and they're part of many people's lives. Yeah. And we have all these dietary things that are, healthy or unhealthy. And we have all these environmental toxins. We have all of these things are all part of life now. And so I look at cause and effect. What I'm trying to understand when I talk to people, what are the major influences? Now, sometimes you can see real clear cause and effect. Okay. I had COVID and now I have symptoms of long COVID. Okay, well, that's pretty clear cause and effect. And therefore we say, all right, well, what do we know about long COVID? And what we do know is that there are many herbs and herbal treatment that can address the symptoms of long COVID. And so it doesn't matter what is the pathology, because that pathology of long COVID can come from other types of viruses as well. And it can come from burnout, and it can come from, an unhealthy lifestyle. People get chronic fatigue and post-viral syndromes from other things other than COVID. And so what we're trying to do is just determine what is the primary pathology. And it's generally fairly simple. There's inflammation, there's liver toxicity, there's gut microbiome dysbiosis, there's gut-brain axis issues, there's emotional stress, and all of these things. I mean, You talk to people in this clinical context and you hear everybody's unique, but everybody's got basically the same problems. So that's where herbal medicine is really strong, is that we can give people real safe nourishing and rejuvenation, as well as cleansing and detoxification, gently and safely.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That's just so exciting to find somebody like you, because I feel like there aren't, or at least that I'm aware of, there aren't a lot of people like you out there. And especially that you're trained not only in one type of medicine, but you're trained in different, culture type medicines. And so you really get like a complete holistic view of what you need to look at. So what there were so many things on your website that I would love to talk about, but two things that came to mind were, number one, detoxing, and number two, if we can get to I don't think we'll get to this, so we might have to have you back. But the gut microbiome and all those things. But but the first thing I wanted to talk about, and Kathy, if you don't mind, we'll ask your question kind of at the end. So the not the gut microbiome. What was I talking about? The detox.
These are closely, these two topics are totally related. Detoxification and the gut microbiome are synonymous topics.
Oh, okay. Well, that's amazing to know. So tell us about like detoxing. I know a lot of people that some of the detoxing that's happened. There's like different types of detoxing, right? Because there's detoxing from plastics, then there's detoxing from metals, and then there's detoxing from what was in the vaccine. Some people want to detox from the vaccine after finding out some information that they found, and they want to, clear their system. So and this is a big topic. How would you like to get started with this topic?
Let's keep it really simple.
Yes.
50% of what the body is doing right now, physiologically, is detoxification. And it's been doing that ever since we were conceived, okay? And so it's always happening. And that's the big misunderstanding, is people think that it's a linear process. Oh, I have to do a cleanse and then I'm going to be clean. It doesn't work that way. The body is always detoxifying. That's 50% of what our organism does. The other 50% is that it assimilates energy. It assimilates sunlight that's in the food. It assimilates earth nutrients that are in the food. It assimilates water from the earth, okay? So our body is an organism that assimilates and extracts energy from the environment. And in that process of extracting it and breaking it down and burning it up and using it, it creates waste. And that's the other 50% of what our body is doing. It's detoxifying. So the body's always detoxifying, all right? So that's the starting point for understanding the detoxification process. Now, there's a lot of confusion about this detoxification process because people don't realize that it's always happening. But all we have to do to keep it simple is, well, just take a deep breath, breathe in. That's taking in energy. And then you exhale. That carbon dioxide is detoxification. You're detoxifying every time you exhale. You're detoxifying every time you empty your bladder, every time you have a bowel movement, okay? You're detoxifying every time you get a little bit of exercise. You're detoxifying every time you eat good food and you get good hydration. And you are detoxifying especially when you get a good night of sleep, all right? So we don't have to get overly concerned about all the toxins that are around us, as much as we need to support the body's natural detoxification processes. And if we do not understand that, there's a high risk that we're going to hurt the body's natural detoxification processes by overstimulating them. And so let's go back to the gut microbiome. And microplastics, there's a good example. So microplastics are coming into the gut all the time. It's in the food chain. It's in the plastic wrap. Okay, it's on your plastic cutting board. It's coming in with the food. Now, there are things we can do that we can minimize how much comes in, but that's prevention. And we can prevent many things from coming into the body, but it's still going to come in. And if those microplastic particles come in, then we have some degree of control over whether they go out or not, right? Now, people think, well, I need to flush the colon to get the plastics out. I need to do a detox. I need to do a cleanse because microplastics are getting in. That's how you're going to get more plastic into your body. How is that going to work? Because if you become overly preoccupied and fanatical about taking laxatives and doing coffee enemas and doing colonics and all these kind of things because you think you got to detox your colon, you're going to end up destroying the microbiome of your gut that protects from the microplastics so that it doesn't penetrate into the body at a deeper level, specifically the liver. So the more detox that people do, the weaker the immune system becomes. And it's fine to do detox if you are strong and healthy, but a lot of people think that their symptoms are coming because they need detoxification, but they're in their 60s or their 70s and they're already undernourished. And so there's a very important principle in Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine has known about this balance between detoxification and rejuvenation with nourishment for a very long time, thousands of years. And I like to quote a woman doctor who is also a Taoist priest who wrote in a medical scripture about 900 AD. She summed it up beautifully. Nourish the weak, cleanse the strong. Okay, so I have a lot of conversations with people who have hurt themselves with excessive detox. Now, excessive detox can be acute, or it can be moderate, or it can be very mild. Okay, detoxification practices can be very harsh, or they can be moderately strong, or they can be very mild. Now, we have to do this on an individual basis because if your body can't tolerate strong detox, you're going to get weaker. And if you get weaker, you're going to be more sensitive and vulnerable to the toxins getting into the deeper parts of the body. So therefore, if we understand these principles, what we find is that many times we don't need to worry about flushing the microplastics out of the gut. What we need to focus on is building up the gut immunity to the microplastics. And that's the same thing with all toxicity. One fundamental misunderstanding that people have is that there is a linear concept. I am going to do a detox and then I will be clean. It doesn't work that way, like I said. Toxins are always coming in, the body's always getting them out. And if you push the organs of elimination too hard, then they will get weaker and weaker. And many times, what people really need is they need their immune system to be rejuvenated. And in the case of microplastics in the gut, what that means is that we need to strengthen the gut membrane integrity so that the plastic particles don't penetrate into the liver. Now, what we know is that microplastics cause inflammation in the gut. Now, if inflammation in the gut builds up, then the gut membrane integrity becomes weaker. So if you start to do harsh laxatives or you start to take all kinds of detox formulas, you start to use all kinds of parasite cleanses and things like that, it's a very high likelihood you're going to increase inflammation in your gut because a lot of those are stimulant laxatives and a lot of them are very bitter types of herbs. And over time, even just within a couple of weeks, you might start to get heartburn, you might start to get diarrhea, you might start to lose weight, you might start to lose your appetite. And that's making you more vulnerable to the toxicity in the digestive tract coming into the deeper levels. All right, so we have to balance detoxification. Now, the reason that this is really important is because I'd say half of the people in my clinical practice have hurt themselves from doing excessive, prolonged, and too harsh detoxification. And they didn't consider their age, their constitutional strengths, or the climate and the season and all of this kind of thing. And they don't need any more. And we've got to slow everything down and start building them back up again, okay? So we've got to find that balance between detoxification and nourishment. But some of the really harsh things, and I'll just point out a couple things here. Probably the worst that I've seen is I've seen people lose their gallbladders because of this so-called gallbladder flush. Okay, well, if there's a stone in your gallbladder, you better know about it before you try to flush it out. There's a lot of misconceptions about that one. People say, oh, I always get stones out. I say, well, how do you know? They say, oh, I see them floating in the toilet. And I say, stones don't float. Okay, that's olive oil. So you've got to understand the detoxification mechanisms medically. A lot of the detoxification processes are not medically realistic or even safe. So people can really hurt themselves with some of the harsher things. And then, you know, if people just do it too long, they can start losing weight and they can become colder and their immune system goes down and they keep thinking, oh, I'm getting more and more toxic. And some people actually, I have heard this many times, some people are actually told, you know, by companies and by multi-level marketing reps that as they get sicker and sicker, they're detoxing. No, that's not how it works. If you are supporting the body's natural detoxification processes, you're getting stronger and stronger and healthier. All right, I'll pause here. How's that for an opening line?
Yeah, so wow, it's just an eye-opener really, because you hear about right now a lot of stuff about parasites and about detoxing with the microplastics. That's what's, you know, what I see mostly on my feed is all about the parasite cleanse, and it gets discussed a lot. So how do you balance all of this?
Oh, let me talk about parasites. All right, so parasitology is a branch of medicine. It's a real branch of medicine. There are real parasites. They can make people very sick and they can kill you. And what is discussed in popular internet medicine culture is what we could call pseudoparasitology. And the reason that it's pseudoparasitology is because there's no such thing as a parasite cleanse. There's no such thing as a parasite cleanse because in order to cleanse parasites, you have to understand medical parasitology, all right? Medical parasitology starts with the understanding that there's hundreds of microbial species. And parasite cleanses don't take any of that into account. Oh, just take this, it's going to cleanse the parasites. Well, there's hundreds of species, okay? Some attached to your duodenum, upper GI tract. Some live in your colon. Some are in your bloodstream. Some are in your liver. Okay, but it's not true that everybody has parasites. That's a misconception. So one of the first things that happens in a conversation about this, people say, well, I have parasites. I say, well, how do you know? And they say, well, you know, I did this stool sample and I see that there's all this overgrowth of these things. Now, if you do a stool sample and it shows that you have amoebas or you have worms, okay, those are parasites. Okay, that's medical parasitology. But if you don't do at least a stool sample, you're not going to know. If you're just doing parasite cleanses and you don't even have an identification or a diagnosis, you're not treating anything. So the starting point for parasites is you must have a diagnosis. And so parasitology is actually integrating natural medicine and Western medicine together, but they have different roles. So for parasitology to be relevant and effective, you must first find out if you have a parasite. Now, many people think they have parasites because they have digestive problems, but there's all kinds of reasons people have digestive problems other than parasites. And if they start attacking parasites without even knowing if they're there or not, there's a high likelihood they're going to make their digestive symptoms worse, okay, because the gut's already stressed out. And those herbs are really bitter and harsh and laxative. So people are attacking all kinds of things in their stomach and they don't even know what's there. Somebody told them you have parasites. Well, my suggestion is, why don't you track it down and see what you got? Now, here's a clue. If you go to a part of the world that's unhygienic and you're living in some unhygienic places and you get a feverish diarrheal disease, some symptoms like that, you might have picked something up. And if your digestion was good before that and then it was ruined after that, you probably picked something up. So then what do? Then you use Western medicine and you do some stool samples and you find out if there's an organism there. And you can confirm this by looking at the blood work also. All right. You're not going to make any progress with this unless you really track it down and really find out if you have a parasite. Now, if you have a parasite, well, it's good news and bad news. You found it, but the bad news is now you got to treat it. And most parasites are really stubborn to get out. And that's another reason why parasite cleanses are not really that effective, all right? Because real parasites are a pretty difficult medical condition to deal with a lot of times. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't get benefits from parasite cleanses, but the benefits that they get probably aren't from cleansing parasites. Probably what happened is if you had some digestive symptoms and then you took a parasite cleanse and you felt better, those herbs helped your gut function. All right. Now, if you identify a parasite and it's a typical parasite that's pretty stubborn to work with, you can try treating it naturally. Sometimes you can help the body get rid of it. Sometimes if you boost the microbiome again of the gut, gut immunity can help to self-clear parasites. But frequently that is not the case. And so in medical parasitology, what has to be done is first you identify it, and then frequently people have to take a medication to knock it out. All right, well, that's not so nice either. But that's where natural medicine comes in, because natural medicine is not strong enough to knock out a lot of parasites. Strong enough to irritate your gut, but not strong enough to get rid of them. And so therefore, it's a perfect example of integrating allopathic drugs and herbal treatment. Because if you know the parasite, if you've got amoebas, all right, you better treat it carefully with a parasitologist. If you got roundworms, well, you could knock it out in a couple of days with a standard worm medicine. But then what? Then your gut immunity is affected. And that's where natural medicine is really strong. So that's where we see that sometimes we need some drugs to knock some things out because the herbs won't do it. And that includes a lot of infections, okay? Antibiotics are still the gold standard for treating a lot of microbial infections. And I will tell people if an infection is just raging and the herbs aren't working, you better go take the antibiotics. We have to use these stronger drugs if we need them for medical purposes. But then what? Then we use the herbs to build ourselves back up again. All right, so that's the story with parasitology.
So I see that Debbie was asking about biofilm, and I'm not sure if that has anything. Does that have to do with parasites? Biofilm?
Biofilm is just a physiological phenomena. It's kind of a trendy topic. You wake up in the morning and you got, your mouth feels sticky. Well, it's biofilm. Okay. So, your plaque, you got periodontal disease. You got to go get your deep cleaning every 3 months. Okay. That's biofilm. All right. It's just a normal part of the body. Okay. But we also want to make sure that we're not attacking anything too harshly. That's just a normal part of the body. Now, people get confused a lot when they do these cleanses because they say all these things came out, right? And I say, well, did you put it in a jar and have it analyzed? They say, no. I say, you can't say anything about what it is then. It's not scientific to just say all these parasites came out into the toilet. Most parasites are not even visible to the naked eye.
I know, exactly. I've always been confused about that.
You can't see them. The only thing that you can see are worms. All right.
Right. And
so that's one of the main indicators that a person is thinking in terms of pseudoparasitology is when they say, I did a parasite cleanse and all the parasites were there in the toilet. And I say, you can't see parasites. Okay. Now, if you go and you get them, do a stool sample and you do a few of them, sometimes it takes a few to find it. You find something, great. Okay. Now you know. But what happens more commonly, unless you actually have been infected. Now, this is real medical parasitology, is if you go somewhere, you live somewhere, and you do get infected. And I have experienced that. I had real parasites. That's part of how I got familiar with this, because I lived in Kathmandu for so many years and traveled in India extensively. And everybody gets parasites there. So that's why the medical history is really important. Did you spend time in unhygienic places? Yes. Did that happen before you had your digestive problems? Yes. Did you ever follow through and look at the stool sample after all of this happened? No. Well, let's do a stool sample and let's find out if you picked something up when you went to Morocco. Okay. And then we look at it, and many times there are no parasites. Sometimes there are, and then we proceed. But more commonly, there's overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria. Okay, now that can come from a lot of things, but you have to be very careful here, because the naturopathic community, the functional medicine community, likes to attack everything. They think very allopathically. And so there will be some overgrowth of Klebsiella, there'll be some overgrowth of Candida, and the doctors will say, well, that's what's causing all the symptoms. Okay. But that's not true. The overgrowth, for the most part, is a side effect. It's a symptom of weak gut immunity. And the more you attack, the more nystatin you take for the Candida, the weaker your gut's going to get. And the more berberine you take, okay, the weaker your gut's going to get. You have to be very careful about allopathic thinking in natural medicine. And so many times we do not need to attack. We need to build gut immunity so that it can protect itself. Now, this is true for a lot of things. It's true for heavy metals also. People can really hurt themselves trying to detox heavy metals. And that's really complicated. And it takes us to an entirely different definition of detox. Shall we cover that?
Yeah, well, definitely we need to at least address it just a little bit.
All right. So I'll give you the definition of detox. It's totally different. All right. Now, we live in a toxic world. We always have. And people have always gotten sick from toxins, microbial toxins especially. Okay. And heavy metals have always been there. They've been there, a million years of Homo sapiens existence. There have been heavy metals. So there's a psychological aspect to all of this as well. And that's to understand that we're never going to be clean in a toxic world, but we can be strong. That's the difference. And the more we try to clean, the weaker we're going to get. And so we have to build. And like the priestess Hu Yin said, nourish the weak and cleanse the strong. So if you are up to age 50 and you have a strong constitution and you have something that needs to be detoxified, great. If you're over 50 and you're getting weaker, you got to start easing off on the detox and start increasing the nourishment. But here's another thing that's really important. The most important toxins are not coming from the outside. The most important toxins are not microplastics. They are not heavy metals. They are not parasites, unless you have a specific parasitic disease, okay? Or unless you are actually suffering from metal poisoning, all right? You are a gold miner in the Amazon handling mercury with your bare hands. You'll get mercury poisoning.
Right.
That's where detox is necessary. But the worst toxins are not from the outside. The worst toxins are from the inside. And so what are the worst toxins in our modern society? Cholesterol, sugar, inflammation. Okay, those are the three really serious toxins. And if you want to detox, you've got to start with that. Now, what's very amazing about it is that if you start to really work on your metabolic syndrome, you bring down your weight and bring down your blood pressure and bring down your cholesterol and bring down your sugar, you are detoxifying. You are detoxifying all those internally generated toxins that are coming because of deficiency, because your body is too weak. All right. So that's more important than focusing on the external toxins. And that's also really important psychologically as well, because what we really want to achieve is homeostasis. And if we have physiological homeostasis, then the body manages inflammation itself. And it manages the immune reactions to the toxins. And it manages all the physiological processes. And that's the goal. The goal is not clean. The goal is strong. And the goal is balanced. And so if we have strong vitality, strong immunity, and we are in homeostasis, we can live in a toxic world and have toxins coming in and going out and even getting stored in the body, and we're still going to be healthy. But if we try to overdo it, we will hurt that vitality and throw our homeostasis off and weaken our immunity. That's the essence of what I am telling people about detox.
Wow. Okay. I love this. I really love this because this is about really trusting what we were given, right? This machine, this beautiful machine. And all we have to do is keep up this machine with good input and the machine will do its job. So I really just love the message here that it is our body that will keep us healthy. And if we have
to help it though.
Right, exactly. And that's what you're saying.
We have to know how to help it. You see, now, in the historical context, people have hurt themselves and even killed themselves trying to get well for thousands of years. It's nothing new, but it requires a very high level of understanding to take care of the body. And that's the main problem, is that it's fair to say that the medical system, and I'll just say here in the United States, is really breaking down. It's hard to get really good help. It's hard to find a good doctor who's got the time to talk to you.
Yep.
And it's hard to find naturopathic doctors who aren't just, using these wastebasket diagnoses of parasites and heavy metals. That's like what everybody is being told. That's just not true. Okay, so it's hard to find good quality medical care, first of all. And so people are really sick. That's the other part of it, is that health is really going down rapidly in the population. And you put those two things together, and it's no wonder that everybody is going to the internet and shopping and talking to AI and what should I do? And what's important to remember about internet medicine is that most of it is marketing driven. And therefore, if you look at what do I do about this problem, you're going to see these products, and the products are all going to say, everybody needs these. Now, here's something that I also do in my personalized approach in my clinic is it's pretty common that people will tell me, well, I've got 100 supplements in my kitchen.
Yep.
I said, well, how do you use them? They say, well, I take a handful here and a handful there on an empty stomach. I said, well, no wonder you're having digestive problems. So the majority of those things are not even relevant for what the person needs. And so we need to make it really targeted by understanding what do you need? And keep in mind that naturopathic and functional medicine is based primarily on nutraceuticals for supporting nutritional status, okay? But a lot of things in natural medicine also have the same problem that happens in allopathic medicine with the drugs, which is that a prescription drug can be very good for one thing, but terrible for a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So you take your statins, it's going to definitely lower your LDL, but it's going to give you terrible inflammation in your musculoskeletal system and contribute to your cognitive decline. But it's good for your LDL, okay? Well, the same thing has to be critically analyzed with natural medicine, because people can be told things like you need berberine, okay, for this or that, and it may be true, but that berberine might just tear up your stomach, okay? So therefore, we have to look at everything in much more detail on an individualized level. And who's got time for that? That's the main problem. So we're trying to solve complex problems with a lot of confusing information. And that's why I keep coming back to this term, clinical level self-care. We have to understand these basic principles, like your stomach is the boss. It doesn't matter how good that product sounds. You better test it and see if your stomach likes it or not. All right. Simple principles like that can take us a long ways in figuring out what works.
Yeah, so that's a perfect intro, not intro, but what I wanted to discuss next, which is like what you offer on your website. So Jeff, if you can bring up his website, if you go to shop on the top, it'll say shop. If you go there, we can see all the options that David has available, which of course he gives consultations, one-on-one consultations. He has also these courses that he has in there as well, which are fantastic, and some other things in there. So David, I wanted you to just cover real quickly the courses to see how this can help others.
I have basic courses. This website is relatively new. I have been teaching for many years online courses at different places. Mm-hmm. This website is just in the last 2 years. I've put these courses up. And these are courses like on detoxification, safe detoxification and healthy digestion, simple things, that people are confused about. But the main thing that I do is over on my consultation page, okay? I launch these courses, usually have, pretty good attendance. I have some guided meditations. We do some free events. If people would like to join that, they can get on my mailing list. But the main thing that people come to the site for is to schedule for a consultation.
Yes.
And so if you go back to the top there and you can see consultations, you go back to the homepage, or up at the top, you'll see consultations. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so that's the consultation page, and this will describe clinical level self-care, the principles here. And if you scroll down on that page, what you'll see is how natural medicine can be integrated with modern conditions. And what I'm doing here is I'm addressing a lot of the things that I see. People are being threatened. Their doctor is threatening them with blood pressure medications. Okay, and I said, well, all right, let's try something natural for a little bit and see if we can get it down. And if not, then let's try using both. And the principle there is use the least number of prescription drugs as medically necessary and at the lowest dose. Because a lot of people are just taking all kinds of things. I mean, I've had people that are on 15 prescription drugs. That's not medically necessary, okay, for a lot of people. 1 or 2 may be medically necessary in an acute situation, okay? But we talk about how to use natural medicine in all kinds of ways, not just interfacing with allopathic medicine, but how do you learn to be sensitive to how the herbs are working in your body, okay? What is your constitution? What's the balance between nourishment and detoxification? What's your health history? All that stuff we talked about at the beginning. That's what I do. And, you know, it's very gratifying. It's very fulfilling. It's very complicated. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to do this, but you know, I have seen that this approach can have really good results, even in very complicated cases. And sometimes that means, you know, remission of a complex autoimmune condition, or something is really resolved. The person, you know, had this or that, and now it's gone. Okay, so natural medicine really works. You just have to know how to use it right. That's all. And if it isn't working for you, then it's just not the right thing. You have to find out why. So that's what I do. That's the consultation. That's mostly what I do. And then I have, you know, the events and my books and guided meditation audios and things like that. I teach a lot of herbal medicine integrated with spiritual practice because of one fundamental, amazing, miraculous thing that happens. And that is herbal medicine can be used to support our meditation practice. And it's always been like that. There's always been a role for herbal medicine to deepen concentration, to strengthen the brain, to help focus, to relax the nervous system. And so we can use herbs to support our spiritual practice, and we can use meditation to potentize the herbs. Because when you take herbs mindfully and you are really paying attention to them, you can really feel them. And you can magnify all those body sensations that are coming from that simple cup of chamomile tea. You can amplify its effects. So a simple cup of chamomile tea can become a powerful, powerful medicine if you take it with meditation practice and focus. And that is really an amazing thing, because if you are amplifying all those body sensations from the herbs that you're taking, that means that you are potentizing the herbs with your mind. So that's something that I teach. It's very fundamental. There's a specific course on just how to do that, actually. And I always do. What's that?
Which one is that? Which one is that course?
That's called 10 Illuminated Herbalism Practices. Illuminated herbalism means that we potentize the herbs using our meditation practice. Okay.
I love that. I totally missed that, but wow, I am so excited. I'm a huge meditator.
Nice.
I went to a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat, and I'm thinking of doing a 20-day one.
Okay.
And yeah, this definitely is something that I had never heard of, and I love the idea.
This is ancient. This is ancient. Everybody heard about it in Tibetan medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. You know, it was a normal part of the herbal practice. I mean, I saw amazing ceremonies that were just for blessing medicines. Okay, hundreds of monks gathered all together just to bless medicines.
Wow.
And then, of course, you know, in the Amazonian tradition, everybody is singing, you know, to bless the medicines. So it's a universal thing, and it works. There's something about the prana, the life force, the chi in the plant. That's a form of intelligence. You know, plants contain the cosmological intelligence of the earth. as different energies and molecules. Plants are highly intelligent. And that intelligence comes into the body and it mixes with the intelligence of the human body, which is also evolved out of cosmological intelligence of the earth. Okay. And so therefore, when we take herbs, we are actually mixing two kinds of cosmological intelligence, plant intelligence and human physiological intelligence together. And we're using the plants to support and balance the human physiological intelligence to help it restore homeostasis. But there is a very powerful effect, not just when those two forms of intelligence come together, but when those two forms of intelligence come together and the mind is present and the voice is activating it with sound and the heart is connected to it as well. And so when the human mind and voice and heart are all participating with that blending of plant intelligence from the universe and human intelligence from the universe, that's when we get maximum healing powers.
Wow. Wow, that's fantastic. I am so excited about that. Thank you so much. I have learned so much today. You are just wow, it's just impressive the amount of information that you have. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I am so really honored to have had you and just the information that you carry. I hope that knowing that your teachers are not here anymore, I hope that you know, somehow get to save all the information that you know so that it gets passed on and maybe become a teacher to others, you know, of all this information that you know, so that this information is preserved for the future.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I feel very grateful to my teachers and I feel a responsibility. So that is a big part of my spiritual practice in doing medicine is gratitude to all those teachers who gave me all of this teaching originally. Okay, now those teachings were all from the classical systems, but it's a constantly evolving process of understanding these things. And we can learn all of this ourselves, okay? And we can especially learn how the body works and especially learn how the plants work if we study everything on two levels, two basic levels. We study it intellectually and academically like I did, but then we also study it on the level of body awareness. And if we are increasing our body awareness and we're increasing our intellectual understanding of medicine and plant medicine, then we can reach a very deep level of understanding who we are, what we are, and how to keep ourselves well. So thank you, Elisa, very much for excellent discussion. Thank you, Jeff, again for the invitation. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you to all your listeners.
Thank you so much.
Right, I'm just going to end the stream here. So our listeners there who are still on the radio, if they want to, they can watch the shows and all the content there that was put up on Radio FM 88 Australia, YouTube channel, Facebook. Thank you very much, David. And it'd be remiss on me not to say, come on back.
Thank you.